Did you guys hear that? This meeting is being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to see if it was only on my end that they played that particular sound. So as it said, the meeting is being recorded. And if you'll notice on the Canvas website, I download the meeting and put it back on the Canvas website under modules, so that if you ever miss a meeting, you can go back and click. All you have to do is click on it, and then you can watch the meeting, and there'll be the 3 codes that I'm going to give you during the meeting that will allow you to take that little quiz. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So don't forget, what's coming up. Don't be overwhelmed by looking at everything and saying, wow, this is so much to do, I'll never get all this done. It's not that bad. These video quizzes are actually easy. The first one was the hardest one by far, but the second one, the grades are like 90, 100, 80, 90, 100, and the other video quizzes are the same. And these Zoom video quizzes, these conference video quizzes, once again, those are just free points, so you can get those fairly easily. And as I mentioned several times, remember, you get to take the test twice. So if you don't do so well in the first time, you can take it again, and it'll take the highest of your 2 grades. All the chapter tests are like that, including the final exam. So as I've mentioned several times, when you take the test, you have 2 hours. There's 100 questions, but they're all A, B, C, D, and true, false. You don't have to write anything. I don't care about your spelling, your English ability, and those sorts of things. I've actually had instructors in the past before. One of them was at Cal State Northridge, where I taught anatomy and physiology, and he said that there should be a writing component in every class. And I said, a writing component in anatomy and physiology? Are you kidding me? Do you care about how well your doctors write? Doctors, you know how they write prescriptions? It looks like it's written in Egyptian. I don't care about that. I care about, is the doctor good? Do they know what they're doing? I don't care if they're male, female, what race they are, or what gender they are. I care, are they a good doctor? That's all I want to know, not their politics or anything. So that's why I make the questions objective. Remember, objective means there's no opinion. Subjective means there's opinion. And if you have short essay or essay questions, even though they say, oh, there's a rubric, I hate that term. You probably run into that in other classes. That's a big thing. Rubric. I don't know, some geometry teacher came up with that crap. Anyway, they said, well, you didn't meet the rubric. Well, the rubric is just a subjective thing they set up, basically the way they want you to answer the question. And anytime you have to write something, a lot of times they'll grade you on your writing ability. Maybe not on purpose, but they end up doing that. And nutrition is not like that. This English professor, when he said that in kind of an obnoxious way, I said, I think there should be a component of nutrition in every class, including your English classes, because I can tell you right now, nutrition is more important than English. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to know how to, write and speak English and stuff like that, but that doesn't really affect your health. Maybe it affects your job. Nutrition affects your health. And so in my opinion, this is sort of a biased opinion, it is the most important course offered in any college or any campus. Now, of course, they're going to say, wow, he's a nutrition instructor. Of course, he's going to say that. But I've taught many courses besides nutrition. So let me give you the first code. So if you got a piece of paper and a pencil, jot it down. And when this meeting ends, once again, you'll enter the 3 codes. Number 1, the code number 1 is 071. One more time, it's 071. So everybody got that? Okay. And I will give you the second code somewhere in the middle of the meeting. It's scheduled for 2 hours, but very rarely do they go the entire 2 hours. So the video quiz, the second video quiz, is due tomorrow. You have until midnight. It's not difficult. Just watch it. It's like only a 15-minute video. Watch it a couple of times. Take the quiz. You'll be fine. The big thing coming up is the test, the first chapter test, and that's already open. So you can take it whenever you want. And as I've mentioned in the messages I've sent you, there's 6 study guides associated with this test. And hopefully you've been working on the study guides. If you have your study guides done, or most of them done, you can't answer all the questions on the study guide because some are a little vague, but you can get some of it. If you have your study guides done as much as you can, there beside you, and then you have your book or ebook. If you have the ebook, you'll be okay. And some of the things I'm going to give you tonight, I think you probably won't need to take the test twice. I think the first score will probably be okay, but I can't say that for sure. But in case it's not okay, then once again, you can take it twice. Check the deadlines on that. I think, let me double check here. It's due, I can't remember. I think July 4th or 5th, 6th. I don't know. Check on the Canvas website. It says that, but it's open now. When something's open, that means you can take it whenever you're ready. But don't take it, like I said, unless you've got the study guides. So now what I'm going to do right now, guys, is I'm going to screen share. And test number 1, as are all the tests, the questions are selected from a question bank, which has like 180 questions in it, but it randomly chooses 100. So when you take the test the first time, you don't do so well. You say, oh, I want to take it again. You'll notice, wow, some of the questions are different. Some of them are the same, some are different. So, but they're not harder or easier either way. It's still from the same chapters and they're still from the same study guides. But you'll notice that that's not by design, that I'm trying to fool you or trick you, that kind of stuff. So just be aware of that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it on screen share, and I'm going to do this for all the tests. I randomly picked 15 questions. I cut and pasted the questions and the answers on the first test so that you have that beside you. Then that'll help a little bit. Now there's 15 of these. How many of these will appear on your test? I don't know. I'm guessing maybe 10, because that's just the law of probabilities. Out of like 180, you'll probably get, you might have all 15, you might only have 8, you might have 9. I'm not really sure. So if you know how to take a picture of a screen on your computer, you can do that. However, what I'm going to do after this meeting is I'm going to email you this document. It's a Word document, so that you have it and you can print it out. Or you can go back and say, oh, I want to go to the recorded meeting, and you can watch the recorded meeting and freeze it right there where that thing is, and then, I don't know, write it down. I would write it down. You take a picture of it with your cell phone. You can even do that when I screen share them in, and if you want to do that. But you don't have to. Like I said, I'm gonna email you the document. So here we go. Let's see if I can mess this up. I'm pretty good at doing that. So do you see what I see? Do you see where it says screen share? Okay, hold on. All right. So do you guys see what I see? Do you see my desktop?
Yes.
Can anybody hear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so hold on a minute. There's a lot of junk on this. Here we go. Oh, wrong one. I knew I'd do that. Word usually pulls up the last document you've worked on. Oh, hold on. It was email. Let's see here. Oh, there's 2 of them. Okay, I think this is it. Let me make it larger. Do you guys see this Word document? It says test 1, a few questions with the answers. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So Here's the question. Here's the answer. These are from the test bank, from the book. The reason I picked these 15, they're randomly selected, but not totally randomly, is because they were some of the harder questions. When I look back, the number of students that missed these was pretty high, because some of these you have to use a little formula on, like these, little formula. It's all in the book. So I picked a lot of those. So these 15, how many will actually show up on your test? Like I said, I'm not sure. So you don't need to take a picture of it because you wouldn't be able to get the whole thing anyway. I'm going to email it to you. Okay, guys?
Okay.
So I'm going to stop the screen share. So that's
Thank you.
another little piece of information you'll have for the test. Once again, you'll have your book, you'll have that little document, and you'll have your study guides. Allow a 2-hour window where you're not bothered, because it's continuous. Once you start that test, it's like it just starts counting down 2 hours from there. But I don't. A lot of people take it like in 45 minutes or an hour. Very few people take the entire 2 hours. So you'll be fine. Once you master taking the chapter test, really not a lot else to worry about as far as this class goes. Now, what I want to talk a little bit about tonight, this is also on the first test. I'm looking at a little note sheet here. I have topics written down, but I don't sit here and read notes. I don't put PowerPoints up and go over item by item on the PowerPoints, because I feel like I know this stuff. I don't need to read it from a book or what somebody else says. I've got a brain. I can think. You have a brain. You can think. Some people with a degree don't have a brain. They don't think. That's just my personal opinion. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, I've been around a long time, and I can tell you right now, don't be, I'm not saying disrespect authority, but don't respect it just because of they're in a position of authority. They're a teacher or a doctor or a coach. I've taught this a million times. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm this, I'm that. That's all great. I've written a book. I've done this. Find out, do they know what they're talking about? And, find out for yourself, especially when it comes to nutrition and medicine and things like that. I could just give you so many horror stories from people that are medical doctors that you would think they would know. It's really surprising. My brother is a dermatologist, and he's one of the top dermatologists in Texas, and he says a lot of the doctors just go to medical school for the money. He says they are interested in the money, and the pretense of caring about people is just that, a pretense. Now, I'm not saying they're all like that, but a lot of them are, and so that's very unfortunate. And he said he's seen some bozos that have graduated with MDs. Now, most of them are not like that, but some, unfortunately, are like that. So, if you have any condition or something, research it, find out what's going on. As I mentioned in the last Zoom meeting, and I've researched all these websites, WebMD, Health, all of them. There's hundreds of them. The best one I've ever run across, once again, is called lef.org. If you go to health concerns at the top, they have them all, and they'll tell you in plain language what the problem is, what the condition is, and what they recommend as far as nutrition and supplements. Now, they do sell things, but their vitamins and supplements and everything they sell is rated the tops, because they research all this stuff. So, make sure when we get into vitamins, when you watch that video, it's called Vitamania, it's going to shock you as to what is really going on with these people selling vitamins and minerals. They're not regulated at all. That's why it's over the counter. Over the counter means it doesn't work. That's why it's over the counter. If it actually works, they make you get a prescription for it. Now, when I say it doesn't work, it might work a little bit, like you have a headache and you take over the counter, Excedrin migraine or something. Does it help some? A little bit. But if you have like severe migraine headaches, you're going to have to get a prescription. And that's sort of an FDA scam where they make money, the pharmacy makes money, the doctors make money. There's so many steps you have to go through that you end up paying 50 times what it's actually worth. I know this. I grew up in a medical family. I could tell you lots of scenarios that this has led to all kinds of problems. But going back, and when we get into diabetes, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the current thinking on it and why a lot of it is actually incorrect. Now, I've had people tell me, I'm used to this. I think people, they judge you by the way you look or your accent or how old you are. Try not to do that, or what your political views are. Just judge the person for who they are. I've had people tell me, well, you're not an MD. I'd say, well, I'm not an Olympic skier either. What does that have to do with anything? It has nothing to do with anything. I have a brain that can think, and I can read, and I can research it. I do, and I'm telling them, well, I'm not an MD, but I'm a PhD. But that too doesn't make me qualified either. So just when somebody introduces themselves or somebody else introduces the other person as an expert, I hate that term. Expert, there's no such thing as an expert. You know what an expert means? It means you know everything there is to know about that subject. You might know a lot. You might know that everybody else more than anybody in the world, but you're not an expert. I'm not an expert in nutrition. There's no expert on the coronavirus, and yet they introduce them on TV. Here's the expert. Here's the expert. If they were an expert, I'd say, well, what is it? What's the DNA makeup of it? What's the genotype of it? And where's the vaccine? If you're an expert, you should have a vaccine already. But they do that a lot. So, use a little common sense. I'm not taking a political view on it. I'm just saying anybody that does that, you got to question that, including what I say, research it and find out. I think you'd be surprised. I think there's a lot of information out there that people just don't, it's not brought out much, a lot by the doctors. What is amazing to me is during this coronavirus epidemic, they talk about wearing masks. It's a good idea. Social distancing. I don't know what that even means. If you don't like somebody, stay away from them. I know what it means, but social distance. Anyway, that's fine. Follow the advice. But it's I don't know. I could go into a lot of detail as to why I have certain views on that. I don't want to spend this whole time talking about that because, well, I'm going to discuss it for a minute. The media. There's 7 billion people in the world. And if the average age at which somebody dies is 70, that's low for the United States, but it's probably high for other countries. It means 1/70th of the world's population passes away every year. There's about 1 billion people. I think I've mentioned this before, but a little bit of a review. Not a billion, it's 100 million. It's 100 million people. You can actually break that down. I know it sounds bizarre, but around the world, about 300,000 people die per day. Per day. Now, what do they die of? Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. All kinds of things. Accidents, yeah, to a degree. Starvation, yeah, a little bit to a degree, but it's mainly these other things that they die of. The flu, more people die of the flu than die of the coronavirus. But yet the media will say worldwide, the coronavirus has now killed something like 400,000 people. That's in 4 months. Now, if you just look at the number, it sounds scary. 400,000, wow, that's more than the population of San Bernardino. In 4 months, 300,000 people die each day. So that percentage-wise, that's actually extremely low. Now, it's sad that anybody dies of anything, not just a coronavirus. Somebody dies of cancer. I think it's just as sad as if they died from the coronavirus. Somebody, 80 years old dies alone in their house with no support, no family support, nothing. They're not going to report on that. That is just as tragic to me as some celebrity or movie star or famous person dying. One life is not worth more than the other life. Yet it's not media worthy, or it's not sensational, and that's what's kind of annoying. So it's really kind of sad. So you got to use your brain and say, okay, 400,000 people died. Is that something I should worry about? No, because what is more important is your health, your heart condition, or diabetes, or Alzheimer's, or these kinds of things that get people. The coronavirus can, but the other things just are amazing. I was in the grocery store the other day. I saw a guy. He looked about my age. He was massive. I bet he weighed 400 pounds. I bet he just barely walk. Yeah, and he had a mask on. Now he might be a nice guy. I'm not judging him. He had a mask on, but like around almost his whole face, like halfway covering his eyes too. And it just struck me, wow. But what you should not be worried about is the coronavirus. Is what you should be worried about. I'm not going to say it to him, but it's diabetes and heart disease and cancer. Address those issues, and then, yeah, he should be worried about the coronavirus because if he got it because of his health, it's going to affect him a lot. But without addressing the other issues, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so, just keep those sort of things in mind. I wish these reporters, even these doctors, when they talk about do this, do that, social distancing, wear a mask, and all these things, why don't they address the real issues? And that's your immune system, the holy grail of medicine, how to boost the immune system, because strong immune system can fight off almost anything, especially this virus, even cancer to a degree. They know that fasting for 3 days, and that's very hard to do, boosts your immune system tremendously. And studies on cancer and breast cancer with people that fasted showed they measured the immune cells, the white blood cells, T cells, and found that once again, um, this was more effective at killing the cancer than was the chemotherapy itself, which is amazing. You'll hear this a lot in this class. I'm a big believer in it. I research it. I've studied it. And if you kind of want to sum up nutrition, like they'll say, well, there's this diet, that diet, eating every other day, things like this. And there's all different degrees of it. There's the 5-2 diet, the South Beach diet, the Atkins diet. I can sum it up for you. Now, you got to take this with a grain of salt. It depends upon your condition. Like if you're somewhat overweight, you can go longer. If you're normal weight, you can't go as long. But basically, the longer you go between meals, the healthier you will be, the less disease you will have, the longer you will live, and the better you will feel. Now, I didn't say you need to eat less. Keep this one sentence in mind. You need to eat less often. Now, what do I mean by less often? Not 3 meals a day. Go to 2, go to 1, go to every other day. I've known people that have done 2 on and 2 off. I know a doctor, he's in his 70s, that he does the 2 on and 2 off on the 2 days he eats. He practices out of Loma Linda. He eats more, probably not twice as much, but he said he's so used to it that when the 2 days he doesn't eat, he said he doesn't even feel hungry. And this guy has got a resting heart rate like around 50. He's very fit. It's just phenomenal. You look at him, you think he's like in his 30s, but he's a big believer in that. And there's a lot of research out on this. Now keep that in mind. You don't have to eat less. You need to eat less often. So don't listen to the nonsense that people tell you. And I know we've touched on this in the previous meetings. Do not listen to them when they say you need to eat 6, 7 little meals a day. As I mentioned last time, I think people may have heard that before, to keep your blood glucose level normal. And I'll stand by this statement, and I can defend it. I can point to studies and what's going on in the body. Anybody that gives you that advice is very ignorant about nutrition. Now, ignorant doesn't mean they're stupid. Ignorant means they don't know, because that will trigger diabetes, cancer, heart disease. It'll trigger all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Once again, you need glucose level to oscillate. It needs to go up and down, up and down. Not too high, because that's the definition of diabetes. Not too low, that's the definition of hypoglycemia. But normal, flatline glucose is very damaging to your cells. It damages the insulin receptors. It triggers all kinds of problems. So how do you allow it to go?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
That was my phone. How do you Siri interpreted something? I must have said something that sounds like Siri. Anyway, how do you get your glucose level to oscillate, to go up and down? More time between meals. That's what's important, including for kids. And that's when we get into diabetes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I want to, actually, I'm going to email this document to you also. I believe last time I showed you the 7 components of nutrition. I have that in a document. I'll send that. I don't need to screen share and show you that, but I'll share that with you next time. But just a little bit of review from that, because everything you know about nutrition or need to know boils down to understanding these 7 components. And once again, you don't need to write this down. It's not on the test, but just put it in your brain. A little bit of a review. There are 3 food groups, as I mentioned, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. The 3 food groups are not particular foods. A cheeseburger is not a food group, although in America it probably would be considered a food group, but it's not. But you can analyze any food that you want just by knowing that. Now, you may not know the exact number of calories, the exact types of vitamins and minerals, but let me give you an example on that. If you keep these 3 aspects in mind, fats are kind of fats, and we'll go into more detail on that. There's different types and there's different ways to categorize them. Proteins are amino acids, and they're in almost everything, including plants. And carbohydrates, as I mentioned last time, don't think of them as sugars. The books a lot of times will explain them as sugars. I'll give you a better way to remember a carbohydrate. It's a plant. Just remember, it's a plant. And fruits are plants and vegetables are plants, but they're not food groups. Fruits are not a food group. Vegetables are not a food group. Carbohydrates are. And so let's go back to a cheeseburger. Let's analyze a cheeseburger. And the way I analyze any food is I start with the 3 food groups, and I always start with carbohydrates. So does a cheeseburger have plant material in it? Yes. Tomatoes, lettuce, the bun. So it has carbohydrates. You may not know the exact number, but the numbers are irrelevant unless you're, a dietitian and you're, evaluating all that stuff. So that's carbohydrates. Does a cheeseburger have protein? Yes, because protein is are amino acids, and it's got meat, but there's amino acids in some of the vegetables in it also. Proteins are in vegetables, so it's got carbohydrates, it's got proteins, and does it have fat? Yeah, it has fat, because fat is in the meat. All meat has fat, otherwise you could, even very lean meat still has some fat in it. And the vegetables and fruits very often have fats in them. Avocado has fat in it, and some of them have very small amounts, and some have a lot. So a cheeseburger has all 3 food groups. You say, wow. So does it have vitamins? Sure, because those 3 food groups have vitamins. Does it have minerals? Yeah, those are in the food groups also. Does it have water? Yeah, water is in almost everything, including beef jerky. Not much, because they got rid of most of it, but it's in almost everything. Does it have fiber? Fiber is one of the 7 components of nutrition. We'll talk more about it later, but basically fiber is anything you eat that you don't digest. And there's different types of it. For example, there's what is called water-soluble fiber, which means if you put it in water, it dissolves. And then there's insoluble fiber, which means you put it in water and it doesn't dissolve. Our body needs both types. Basically, fiber just drags through your system and cleans you out. So do you digest everything from a cheeseburger? No. So it has some fiber. And then the last one is of the 7 components of nutrition are phytochemicals. Phyto, plant, chemicals. The chemicals in plants, and there's thousands of them. It's got a bunch of phytochemicals. And those tend to have some really positive health benefits. So a cheeseburger's got everything you need. So hey, it's a good food. It actually is. But it's also high in calories. And that's what you got to keep in mind. It's like, wow, if I have too many of these, then there's too many calories, and that's what's going to cause you the problem. It's not really the food itself. It's, how many calories it has. And basically, any food that you eat, no matter what it is, cheeseburger, an apple, an orange, is bad for you when your blood sugar or glucose level is normal, because it's going to raise it up, and that's going to cause some problems. not a lot, but temporarily some things. It'll be converted to fat. It does some other things. So I'm not going into a lot of. We'll go into detail later on, not in this meeting. But when your glucose level is low, no food is bad for you, including the cheeseburger. You're not going to gain weight from it because none of it goes to fat cells. That lends to the thinking of more time between meals, the healthier you'll be. I'd give you an example here where I went out to eat at one of the universities I taught at with a bunch of other instructors, and it was at a Mexican food restaurant, and a few of them were nutrition instructors, and the person beside me said, "Wow, I can't believe we teach nutrition and we're eating this." And I jokingly, I said, "Yeah, but this meal, it's going to mess you up, but it's not going to mess me up." She said, "You have special immunity." I said, "Yes, actually I do. Because I haven't eaten all day. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't eat lunch. And my glucose level was low, not hypoglycemic, was somewhat low. So when you eat the meal under those conditions, none of it goes to fat cells. It doesn't really raise blood pressure much. It doesn't do all the bad things that food does to you when glucose level is normal. And there is an understanding in nutrition of these three words. You don't need to memorize this, but put them in your head. And these words are used incorrectly all the time by everybody, including myself. They're appetite, hunger, and starvation, all related to nutrition. Appetite is psychological. So when your brain says, "Hey, I'm hungry, I want to eat," you could eat I could eat 4 or 5 donuts, and then there's a sixth one still there, and I feel like eating it also. Like, wow. And I know I'm not hungry. I just have an appetite because of the sugar and you wanted it. That's appetite. You see food, you smell it, and boom, all of a sudden you think you're hungry. And that term is used, that appetite can happen anytime. The real term that people should understand is hunger. Hunger is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Starvation is a bad thing, but not hunger. There's all these organizations called Stamp Out Hunger, Get Rid of Hunger. That's absurd. You get rid of hunger? That's you don't want to do that. You want to get rid of starvation. Hunger is triggered by hormones. When you don't eat for about a day, true hunger is triggered. There's several hormones involved. Uh, the main hormone that tells you that you're full is the hormone leptin. And the hormone that tells you that you're hungry, it escapes me. It starts with a G. I'm going to have to actually look that up. I can't believe I can't remember that because I've known it for years. But it's ghrelin. It's called ghrelin. It's a hormone that tells you that you're hungry when your glucose level gets low enough that ghrelin's released and it triggers actual hunger. Your body's saying, "Okay, it's time to eat." Now, some people are very ghrelin sensitive. So like after 12 hours in ghrelin, they detect it and they're actually hungry because ghrelin is released. Now, going back to the third term, starvation. Starvation should never be used unless you're actually starving. If you haven't eaten for 6, not days, weeks, then you can appropriately use the term starvation. You can say, "I am starving. I might die from not eating." If you don't eat breakfast and lunch and you say, "I'm starving for dinner," that's actually incorrect. You're hungry because ghrelin's there, but you're not starving. Starving is completely misused all the time. In fact, people, they go, not only do they skip hunger, they go straight to starvation, that's an entirely different issue. The percentage of people that die from starvation in the world is extremely low. It's sad, but it happens. Compared to the percentage of people that die from diabetes and overeating, there's no comparison. Yet you're not going to get people to donate to a website by showing a bunch of overweight kids and that have diabetes and are prone to all kinds of things. You'll get people to donate if you show a bunch of starving kids in a third world country, and then they'll donate, feed the children, things like that. Now that actually does happen, But if you walk into any American school and look around at the first graders and the second graders, all of them, they tend to be somewhat overweight. Now, once again, very often they blame the kids. I don't think it's the kid's fault. Weight is mainly inherited. 90% of your weight as an adult is inherited by your parents. So you may eat a normal amount and be overweight, and somebody else may eat more and never gain weight. I've had students like that. I've known people like that. They're thin, they eat a lot, they're still thin, they think they're getting by with it. I can tell you they're not. Studies show that if you overeat, even if you don't gain weight, you have the same instance as somebody that's overweight of higher diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. All the problems associated with the other person are also associated with that person, even though they're thin, because of the fact that they're overeating. Now, all this goes back to heredity. Heredity has a lot to do with this. But it's really sad in the public schools. I see this all the time. You walk into there and the kids are overweight, and the kids think it's because they eat too much. I think if you just tell the kids that they inherit it and they have to work a little bit harder, to get the weight, maybe a lot harder that they want to be, it's possible. But some people, everything in this life is not equal. They may have to work very hard at it. Sometimes adults have to do the same thing. Now, as I said, weight is not the number determinant of health. You can be somewhat overweight and actually be healthy, just like you can be thin and be unhealthy. Don't judge somebody just by their weight. I've known people overweight that have low resting heart rates, low blood pressure. They're healthy. It's amazing. In fact, if you go to an old folks home and look around, one thing you'll notice, there might be a few older people overweight, but the weight tends to be lower, maybe the midsection, the hips, especially in the hips. The body tends to handle that better than the weight being high, like around the shoulders and etc. That's not the same. That doesn't mean you shouldn't weight lift and things like that. But they don't really know why, but they theorize that the heart has to pump blood up more. If there's more mass up here, it's more strain on the heart. If the mass is lower, especially in the hips, it's less strain on the heart, but they're not sure. But as I said, if you go to an old folks home, you'll find some people that are more pear-shaped, that are older. You find a lot of thin people, but one thing you will not find is tall people. If you are tall, chances of you living a long life are greatly reduced. There is a greater correlation between how tall you are and how long you live than there is between how heavy you are and how long you live. Now, if you're tall, don't throw up your hands in despair saying, oh, I'm going to die young. You probably will, but doesn't mean you don't have any control over it. You can do some things to take care of yourself, nutrition-wise, heart-wise, etc. So is it better to be short or is it better to be tall? I don't know. For athletics, maybe tall. If you want to live longer, maybe shorter. And if being shorter has more health advantages, then why are people getting taller? This is actually happening. It's happening in the US. It's happening around the world. Nature would never do this. Nature only selects traits that are beneficial for the species. It does it in a brutal way, but that's what it does. If you're a deer and you're slow, you're not going to make it. You're going to get taken by a predator because all the other deer are running away and you're the slowest, boom, you get taken. Or if you're a deer and you're not alert and aware of things, you're sitting there grazing when all the other deer are looking up and heard some little rustle, there's something genetically going on and that deer is more likely to be taken. So the species actually becomes stronger because the genes for being slow and unaware are weeded out of the species. All species are like that. If you're an eagle and you have bad eyesight, you'll starve to death. However, with humans, it's not happening like that. Humans are kind of interfering with Mother Nature. Now, let me give you an example of that. Cancer. We should use technology and medicine and all these things to treat and help people with cancer. However, you could almost cure cancer with no medicine, no hospitals, no doctors, no money, nothing in the human species in a few generations. I'm not saying kill everybody with cancer, but nature does this. Nature does this with all animals. If somebody has cancer, because cancer, there's a huge genetic component to cancer, especially things like breast cancer. So if somebody comes from a family, has a family history of breast cancer, you have to say, oh, wow, I'm not advocating this, but I'm saying it would work. That, wow, they can't have kids because they might pass on the genes for breast cancer. There's all kinds of diseases. Adrenoleukodystrophy is one that's passed from the mother to the son. And they know if the mother has the genes, then she doesn't have kids, then the genes in that family for adrenoleukodystrophy will be wiped out in a few generations. And such is true for cancer. For example, one species that's done that's completely got rid of cancer are sharks. Because over the millions or even billions of years that sharks have been around, there's no shark doctors and shark hospitals. Any shark that had cancer that swam a little funny or was a little bit different in the way it acted, it's kind of brutal. The other sharks would actually kill it or would actually die. They wouldn't eat it. So the genes for cancer are wiped out in that species. They've tested sharks and given them injections of cancer-causing chemicals called carcinogens that would kill a person. And on the shark, it just made a little bitty sore, and the sore went away, and the shark swam around like nothing happened. So there's something going on there. Now, I'm not advocating that with people, but nature does this automatically. But don't be fooled by buying shark cartilage. They still sell that. They'll say, wow, the sharks don't get cancer. So they take the cartilage of a shark and try to get you to buy it thinking it'll cure your cancer or help with it. It doesn't work like that. And it's probably not even shark cartilage in there. It's probably just ground up bone from something else because that stuff is actually not regulated at all. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you the second code. So you got a pen or pencil, write this down. So the second code is 121. 121. So everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay. So hang in there. I'll give you the third code in just a little bit. The other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, because we've touched on it, it's in the first test on metabolism and diabetes. We touched on it last time because I think it's so important, and there's such a misunderstanding of what is actually going on in the body as far as diabetes goes. Now, you don't write any of this down. Just kind of put it in your head and try to formulate an idea of what it is and what I should do about it if I have it, if I've been diagnosed as pre-diabetic, if somebody in your family has it, because this disease is running rampant in the United States. It's going up, 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 up with everything that's happening. And cancer is going up, just keeps rising and going up. Diabetes and cancer. Why is that? It's almost entirely related to nutrition, though they won't tell you that. They'll tell you it's chemicals and it's air pollution and it's this and that. It's very little of it is related to that. Some of it, it's about nutrition. But on diabetes, now I expect you to, like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail on it. I've studied it a lot. But diabetes, start with a broad concept. Just like a picture, it's a big picture. You're going to give you a view of the picture, and then we'll start looking at the little pieces. I don't like presenting little pieces, and then you try to figure them all out and how they go together. It's very confusing. They do that in math a lot. They give you all these little pieces, and you have to put them together. I really just start with the whole thing, explain it, and then break it down. I think that's a better way to teach anything, not just nutrition. It's sort of my opinion. But diabetes is simply high blood glucose. That's it. Blood glucose means blood sugar. It's high blood glucose, high blood sugar. Our cells use for energy glucose. They prefer glucose, hence the name blood sugar. Where do cells get this energy from? From the bloodstream, hence blood sugar or blood glucose. All cells use glucose. Now, cells can use two other sources of energy. You don't need to know this, but they can use ketone bodies. In fact, the second video talks about that. The ketone bodies are very similar to glucose. And they can also use fatty acids. So the heart actually prefers fatty acids. But they prefer, all cells, including heart cells, can use glucose. Glucose is so important that if your blood glucose level, blood sugar means the same thing, if your blood glucose level drops to 0, you're going to live about 7 minutes. Just like if your oxygen level drops to 0, you will die very quickly. But that's why people freak out so much, in my opinion, about hypoglycemia. Glycemia means glucose, hypo means low, hyper means high. So diabetes is hyperglycemia. That's not the same disease as hypoglycemia. That's the difference. Hypoglycemia means low blood sugar. So they're related. You can have both, but they're not necessarily the same. You need to be more concerned about hyperglycemia, too high, than hypo. I've known people that have died from hyperglycemia, diabetes. People die from that. I don't know of anybody that's died from hypoglycemia. I'm sure there are. You might could search around and find that. But it's extremely rare. But it's extremely scary when it happens. Because if you've ever had that happen, where your blood glucose is low, because you haven't eaten in a while, or just for whatever reason, that you feel like you're going to pass out or faint, and you actually could. And it's a little bit scary. Fainting is very scary. It's usually not dangerous unless you fall and hit your head on something or you're driving. But dying from hypoglycemia is like dying from lack of oxygen. You ever know anybody die from lack of oxygen? I never have. I'm not talking about falling in a pool and drowning or something like that. Because when your oxygen level gets too low, doctors get concerned about it and they can give you oxygen. But your body, when it gets extremely low, will make adjustments. It does this with glucose too. Unless you have the disease hypoglycemia, it'll drop, but at a certain point, the body says, no, I will not let it go down any lower. And it'll actually start rising. It will start rising even though you're not eating. They know this by testing glucose level for people that fast. First day, glucose drops. If you're not used to doing it, you could feel lightheaded and like you're going to pass out. You may not feel good. Second day, and some people it continues to drop, but in other people it actually will start rising. And the third day, and everybody, it starts rising without eating. Well, what's going on there? Well, glucose is, I want you to think of this, put it in your brain, don't write it down, the 3 energy systems of the body. Like, where does your body get glucose from? All the cells in your body get glucose from the bloodstream. It's a complicated process, but that's where they get it. So your glucose level is constantly dropping. Just by watching this video here, it's dropping a little bit, not much. And when the meeting goes an hour and a half, it'll drop a few points, but not a lot. Well, your body's aware of that. It doesn't really do anything then, but if it keeps dropping your blood glucose level or blood sugar level down to a certain point, then signals, and that usually takes about a day, maybe 12 hours in some people, depends on your initial glucose level, but about a day. Signals are sent to fat cells in your body to release glucose. Now, fat cells don't store glucose. They store fat, hence the name fat cells, in the form of fatty acids. The fatty acids go out of the cell into the bloodstream. They circulate around. They're picked up by the liver. Liver converts them to glucose and puts the glucose back in the bloodstream, and your blood glucose level starts going up at the expense of fat cells, which is great because your fat cells shrink when they do this. They start shrinking like this. And where do they shrink? Everywhere in your body. Where do you have fat cells? Regardless of weight, everywhere you have skin. About half of your fat cells are subcutaneous, under cutaneous skin. Your nose, your ears, your stomach, the bottom of your feet, your waist. They're all there. The other half of the fat cells are internal. They're around organs like the liver and muscles have fat cells, joints have them. There's different types of fat cells. I'm not going to get into that. There's white fat cells and brown fat cells. And there's what's called visceral fat, which is around the stomach. That's kind of subcutaneous and also internals, kind of in between. But these are all basically fat cells. Now, when these fat cells shrink, you lose weight. And it takes about a day for your body to tap into fat cells. So it starts tapping into them a little bit quicker than that, to a degree. So if somebody's trying to lose weight, I would tell them, once again, more time between meals means you tap into fat cells for energy. You can eat the same amount, just eat it in a bigger meal, but eat less often. And this is true for kids also. We're designed by nature to do this, by the way. We've evolved to eat like this. 3 meals a day is just made up nonsense, but that's what people do around the world, and it's led to a lot of problems. Once again, you don't have to eat less often. Now, when fat cells shrink, you shrink everywhere. There's no such thing as spot weight reduction. I've taught classes with athletic trainers that would sit there and argue and say, yes, there is, because I said, no, there isn't. If you go into any place like LA Fitness and tell them you want to lose a little bit of weight around the stomach, what they'll probably tell you is to start doing sit-ups and crunches and things like that. That's going to have very little effect on the weight around your stomach. Basically, if your glucose level is somewhat low, not too low, but somewhat low, which means you haven't eaten in a while, and you start exercising, you're burning calories. That means more of the fat cells are releasing more energy. So all the fat cells are supplying energy, not just the ones around your stomach. Those too are supplying energy. Let me give you an example on that. So this finger is overweight. So I go to LA Fitness and I say, look, got some fat right here in the finger. They go, oh, do sit-ups, finger sit-ups with crunches, with a twist. And they'll say that'll help. And people believe that. This finger, which is not overweight, will lose the same amount of weight as this finger, even though this finger is the one doing the crunches. Because if my glucose is low, all the fat cells in my body are supplying energy, including the ones in this finger and this finger. So what's the difference? At the end of the day, this finger will be more buff. It got a muscular workout. You see that? So the muscular definition will be better in this finger than this finger. So the type of exercise you're doing for weight loss, it doesn't really matter. There are exercises that burn more calories, but not that they burn from a particular area. There's no such thing as spot weight reduction. That's impossible. People that have gained weight or lost weight know what I'm talking about. You gain it in your face. You gain it everywhere. You're like, oh, I just want to lose it in one place. You can't do that. It's just unfortunate, but that's the way it works. I've known people that have lost a lot of weight, and individuals will say, wow, you must be lifting weights. And they say, no, I'm not lifting weights, because they look more muscular. The reason is when fat cells shrink, your skin starts laying on top of the muscle, and the muscles have definition, and it looks like you've been lifting weights. And everybody has that. Even if somebody's overweight, you have that definition that's actually in you. If you've ever watched on ESPN the World's Strongest Man competition, well, these guys are big, especially around the waist, big chested, because of all the things they do, like carrying stones around and stuff like that. They have to have that body type. NFL players, linemen are like that, because they have to have that mass to be able to move. But actually underneath that, they actually have the physique like a bodybuilder. It's just they have the fat actually on top of it. And everybody has that to a certain degree. And it does make a difference. Don't confuse fasting with starvation. They're not the same thing. If you're normal weight and you don't eat for 2 months, that's starvation. And don't eat for a month, that's probably starvation. You could go a while. I don't know why you would do that, because you're not trying to lose weight. But even if you're normal weight, I'm a big believer in spreading the meals out. Every other day, it's fantastic. Even if you're normal weight, you'll be healthier. may not affect your weight much, but you'll actually be healthier. And studies, they've studied everything with this. I mean, you name it: Alzheimer's, lupus, dementia, joint problems, vision, almost every condition, diabetes, especially cancer, has tremendous benefits by this. So, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know why in the world, when they do these things on the coronavirus about this so-called expert, why doesn't he talk about this? People need to boost their immune system. He should say, besides wearing masks, what will help you more is to fast for 2 or 3 days. That's because everybody would attack him, saying, what does not eating have to do with the coronavirus and stuff? Because their immune system would be stronger and they could fight off the virus. They probably wouldn't even get it. Younger people are getting it now, but their immune system tends to be healthier, so they tend to fight it off. It's all about the immune system. If somebody has a very poor immune system and older age actually goes with that, they have to be more concerned about that than other people. So going back to diabetes, it's high blood glucose. And then we're going to do a little 15-minute question and answer session here in a little bit, guys, because this almost concluded everything I want to talk about, but I want to delve a little bit more into diabetes. This is why people don't, including doctors, some don't know, some do. The percentage I'm not aware of, but I bet it's pretty high, the ones that don't know. They know how to treat it, but I don't know if they actually look at the big picture of what's going on. The way they explain diabetes and the way they teach it in medical school is they'll tell you there's 2 types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. And that's the way you've heard of it. Type 1, inherited, and type 2 is at some point in your life you get it. Now, that's the bad way to explain it, but that's the way the books explain it. That's like, I've used this example before. That's like saying, I'm going to go back and review it a little bit. That's like I'm going to teach you temperature, and I go, there's hot and there's cold. And you go, nope, it's in between, and high and low and really hot. And you go, wait, there's a whole bunch of temperatures. Same way with diabetes. That's why now all of a sudden there's a type 3. Type 3 diabetes is actually Alzheimer's, by the way. Same thing. They're synonymous with each other. It's type 3 diabetes. There's even a type 4, which is complicated, but there's new research coming out on it. But just remember, you don't remember all this. You need to remember that diabetes is high blood glucose. That's it. And you need to lower the blood glucose. How do you lower blood glucose? You don't eat. That's it. You don't eat for a while. You don't have to eat less. You need to eat less often. And so any doctor that tells a diabetic that they need to eat breakfast, I just think I think it's malpractice, because they already have high blood glucose and they're just going to raise it even more by eating breakfast. No, that's the one meal you should skip. It just makes a really big difference. So on diabetes, cells use glucose. All cells in your body, on the surface of the cells, have what are called insulin receptors. Now, these receptors detect the hormone insulin in the body. When you eat, your pancreas and blood glucose goes up. Your pancreas secretes the hormone insulin. What insulin does is circulates around in your body, gets out of the bloodstream through the capillaries, and your cells, all cells, are exposed to a little bit of insulin. These insulin receptors detect this. What that is telling the cell is that your glucose is high and food is available for the cell. The cell uses glucose. So the insulin receptors go, hey, there's glucose. And the cell, if it's hungry, will start taking in the glucose. So if you haven't eaten in a while, and all 100 trillion cells in your body, that's how many you have, it's a phenomenal number. All 100 trillion cells start taking in glucose. And glucose level drops, blood sugar level drops. That's fine. Everything's working as it is, and the cells have food. Now, let's suppose glucose level is normal. And that means the cell is not taking in the glucose because it's not hungry. So you eat, glucose level goes up, not hyperglycemic, it goes up. It goes up whether you're diabetic or not. The cell doesn't want the glucose, even though it's there. And the insulin receptors work because cells do not overeat. We overeat, but our cells refuse to overeat. If a cell overeats, it will die. Can you imagine that about a person? If you overeat by one meal, you will die. But a cell will die. It knows exactly how much to take in. There's no room for cells to expand. There is with fat cells because they're under the skin, but other cells can expand, so they won't overeat. They leave it in the bloodstream, and your blood glucose stays high. Your body does not like that because that's the definition of diabetes. So what happens is the glucose circulates around, picked up by the liver. The liver converts it to fat in the form of fatty acids, puts it back in the bloodstream, circulates around, and fat cells will take in the fatty acids, and they get bigger because they can expand. They're under the skin, and blood glucose level goes to normal. So the fat cells took in the food, not the regular cells, because you ate when glucose level was normal. So that's a survival mechanism back when, thousands of years ago or whatever, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when humans couldn't eat every day or 3 times a day. They might not have food for a couple of weeks. They didn't starve to death. Hence the evolution of fat cells. Fat cells store foods when there's no food available, which is a good thing. They're kind of a curse left over by evolution, but they're actually a very necessary thing. So what happens is that, remember, insulin's a hormone that tells the cell to take glucose in. These insulin receptors on the cells, and a lot of this has to do with heredity, are very sensitive to insulin. If you overexpose them to insulin, they start burning out. The cells might have thousands of receptors, and you constantly expose them to insulin, they start burning out in a lot of people, a real high percentage of people. So the cell may be hungry and need glucose, but half its receptors are burned out, so it's not taken in the proper amount. If you have a bunch of cells doing that, then your pancreas is going to make more insulin. So it's going to overwhelm your body with so much insulin that finally the glucose goes in the cell. But that extra insulin further damages the remaining receptors. So your pancreas makes more and more. That leads to pancreatic cancer and a lot of other things. Pancreatitis, and it's a devastating thing to have that, especially cancer of the pancreas, because that's one of the most deadly cancers, and that has a lot to do with the pancreas being overworked. Well, you need insulin. It does some good things. Without it, you can't survive. But you need periods of time where your insulin level is low, which means you haven't eaten in a while. It's never going to go to zero because you always need glucose, but it'll be low. There's all kinds of evidence that the damaged insulin receptors, what damaged them, insulin, can repair themselves if you reduce the insulin level. The body can repair itself. The cell becomes more what is called insulin sensitive, and it'll start responding to insulin. Fasting does this. It helps your cells repair themselves. Yet, if you go to a lot of doctors and you're diagnosed with diabetes, I know the format for this. They'll give you drugs, glucophage, metformin. These help. Nothing wrong with these, by the way. They're from plants. They help even if you're not a diabetic. I'm not recommending going out and doing it, although I've done it. I could actually tell a difference because they're not a hormone. And by the way, hormones, if you find any evidence to the contrary, let me know. But I've never seen any evidence, because hormones are so powerful. They're made by the body. They're made by glands and organs and even cells in the body. They're very powerful. I've never seen credible evidence that hormone replacement has any benefits at all. I like little catch sayings, and this is my theory on hormones. Hormones have temporary benefits, but long-term detriments. All of them are like that, including insulin, estrogen, testosterone, growth hormone, you name it. They're all temporarily, you're going to feel better and function better, but they're going to make your overall condition worse. Insulin does this. Going back to diabetes, insulin. So they try these other things, and diet doesn't work. And they say, wait, we got to get your glucose level down. Now, I'm not saying if you're on insulin, go off of it. If somebody in your family's on insulin, take them off of it because they could die. Depends on how severe it is. But you're trying to lower their glucose, and remember, not eating lowers glucose. So keep that in mind. But anyway, what happens is the doctors will put the person on insulin, and it works temporarily. They take insulin because their pancreas is not making enough, or their insulin receptors are damaged. So they give them insulin, and they overwhelm the receptors with external insulin that the glucose goes in, blood sugar goes to normal, their A1C is normal, they feel better, they function better, and the doctor will say, we've got your diabetes under control. But in reality, what is happening is the diabetes is under control, but you're further killing the remaining receptors. That's why they go up, up, and up on the dose of insulin. And eventually you'll have no receptors on that cell. No amount of insulin will keep that cell alive. If you have enough cells that do that, you go blind, you lose circulation, amputation of arms and legs. What causes insulin? As I mentioned last time, and I stand by this statement, using insulin to treat diabetes is like using alcohol to treat alcoholics. It's insane. It makes no sense to me. I don't know why any doctor would do that. Now, if your diabetes is so far down, so bad, that the only thing that will keep you alive is insulin, I can absolutely understand that. But to start somebody off with insulin without trying spreading the meals out and other things like glucophage, metformin, there's a whole host of those things. Without doing that first and jump right into insulin, it makes no sense to me. Going back and talking about other hormones. Now, if you're missing your thyroid gland, the butterfly-shaped gland right here that controls the rest of your hormone, because sometimes people have that taken out, you have to take the hormone thyroxine. I mean, because you don't have the gland that makes it. So that's a different issue. But if you take, like, for example, estrogen, the female sex hormone, testosterone, the male sex hormone, used to be when women, because my mother went through this, and my dad's a retired doctor, and they're both still alive, but when she went through menopause, my dad, the thinking was, oh, they need to take estrogen because their estrogen levels are so low. And sure enough, they took estrogen, they feel better, they function better, everything goes better. But later on, years later, they said, wow, breast cancer went up, cancer went up, aging, all kinds of diseases associated with taking estrogen. They finally figured out, ooh, you better not do that. Same thing with testosterone. Guys that take testosterone because your testosterone level goes down as you age, you'll feel better, you'll function better, your muscle tone will be better, but you're going to die quicker. You're accelerating the aging process is what you're doing. Hormones do this. That you feel better. Remember, hormones have temporary benefits, but long-term detriments. Now, there's exceptions when people have certain diseases, certain conditions where they have to take it. They have to take certain hormones to a degree. Human growth hormone has been shown to be the same thing. You'll feel better and you function better, but I would be real leery about taking it. The kind you buy over the counter, it's not even human growth hormone. It may say HGH, human growth hormone. If it was a real hormone, they couldn't be selling it over the counter. Remember, anything over the counter is not that powerful. Yeah, but you can buy the really powerful kinds, and they're banned in most professional sporting events and even college events because of the boost you get and the benefit that you get from it. Interestingly enough, one of the things that's banned from some, not all, used to be in the Olympics. I'm not sure if it is now, but I know in the past it was. If you tested positive for caffeine, that's it. That's considered drug abuse. And they actually had a sprinter that tested positive for caffeine, and they took away one of her medals. She said, well, I had a cup of coffee like a few hours earlier. Caffeine's not dangerous, but it does give you a little boost. And they said, oh, any little boost at that level is an advantage. So you got to be careful about that kind of stuff because caffeine's in all kinds of things. That's one of the things we'll talk about in one of the future Zoom meetings is caffeine. Kids eat a chocolate bar and they're running around acting crazy, and parents go, oh, well, it's the glucose, it's the sweets. It's not that. Food doesn't affect behavior like that. It's probably more related to the caffeine, because the caffeine in a young person can give you more of a boost if you're not used to it. pick, like people got to have a cup of coffee in the morning. I could drink a whole pot of coffee and go to sleep. It has no effect on me at all. But I don't think it's really that bad for you. I've seen some studies that say it's not that bad. It's been around for a long time. But once again, keep in mind that this is true for anything. This is the way all addictions work. Anything you put in the bloodstream over and over, your brain gets used to it. I don't care if it's good for you or bad for you. Caffeine, you keep putting it in the bloodstream and you get used to it. And then all of a sudden you don't have your cup of coffee and your brain goes, hey, where's the caffeine? So what does your brain do? It sends you a message in the form of a headache. Usually headaches are usually triggered by a change in blood chemistry. I know people that don't have caffeine that get a headache. I'm not actually like that, but a lot of people are. But believe it or not, if you're not used to caffeine and you have it, it can cause a headache because you're not used to it in the bloodstream. So be careful about taking even over the counter all the time. Like every time you get the least little headache, you take over the counter Excedrin or migraine, or you constantly do that, your body kind of gets used to it. And so now when you get a headache and you don't take it, your headache may actually get worse because your body's so used to it. Pain pills work like that. That's why people get addicted to them. You feel better, you function better, you take them a while, and all of a sudden you've taken them for so long, you say, oh, okay, I don't need them anymore. You don't take it, and wow, your brain goes, woo, headache. And your body complains. The withdrawal can be horrendous. I mean, alcohol, you name it. Everything's like that, including glucose. You get used to normal glucose because you eat 3 meals a day and you never spread the meals out. And all of a sudden you skip a meal. One of the first symptoms is a headache. And I know people like this. You go, I can't skip supper because I get a headache. If somebody tells me that, I can tell you a lot about their lifestyle that's not that healthy because they're what I call a glucose junkie. They're addicted to it. You should not have headaches because your glucose oscillates like that. If you keep it normal all the time, yeah, you get used to this. When I taught a class at the university, when I taught at the University of Missouri, there was a retired professor there. Actually, it was Southeast State University, Missouri. But anyway, he was retiring, and he was like 70 something years old. You know, kind of nice guy, kind of the Archie Bunker type, though a little bit biased. I thought nice guy, but a little bit. He didn't think he was. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I was new there, and he was retiring. He said, "So let's go have lunch." So he said, "Meet me in his office." I remember it was like at 11:45. I was 15 minutes late because of my class. I got there at 12. We got in his car. He drove like he was in the Indy 500 to the restaurant. It was insane. We got there, and he had this severe headache, and he ordered the same food. Been eating there like 20 years. They knew what to bring him. This lady brought him the soup, same waitress. He starts eating it, and he goes, headache goes away. And then I get this huge lecture about showing up on time. And I thought, this guy is probably 80, 100 pounds overweight. I thought, God, how much does your glucose drop in 15 minutes? Maybe 1 point? Was this headache real? Yes. But he was so addicted to normal glucose level that he could not only not skip a meal, he couldn't even be 15 minutes late for a meal. So be real careful about, with kids, of having meals at always the same time. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. No, you need to spread them out. Have time between meals. I think even for kids, even if they're not overweight, since it's being recorded, somebody's going to go back and complain about this, but I don't really care anyway, because I know I'm right on this. Even for kids, like on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, you might say, I don't know, like for Saturday, we're just going to eat once today. And they would complain, no breakfast, no lunch. They'd come in and be really hungry for dinner. Very healthy for them to have that sort of lifestyle. That's the way we were designed to eat. In fact, you could even say, oh, you know what, it's Saturday, we're just not going to eat today. I don't feel like cooking anything or making anything. And then watch them go tell the other kids, and they tell their mother, and all of a sudden Child Protective Services shows up and says, did you not feed your kids on this day? Just say, yeah, I didn't. So what? Oh, that's child abuse. That's ridiculous. Say, no, I'm being healthy. Ask the guy if they understand nutrition. Kids don't understand it, so they'll think it's punishment. Other people who don't understand it, they'll think it's bad, it's abusive. And that's sort of the thinking now in today's society that we function in. And it's led to diabetes among children. Remember, diabetes is high blood glucose. So now they have a term called juvenile diabetes, adult onset diabetes, type 2 diabetes, um, type 1 diabetes, type 3, gestational diabetes, which means high blood glucose during pregnancy. But just remember, they're all basically just high blood glucose. Okay, guys, I want to allow for just maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll give you the last code here, where you can ask a few questions, and hopefully you can unmute yourself. You can even, tell me your experiences. You can say you've heard the opposite. I'm used to that. And I'll give you my advice. Like I said, I'm not an MD. I am a PhD, but not an MD. I'm not trying to pass myself off as an MD, but I have a brain and I can think. So hopefully by the time you get out of this nutrition class, you'll have a real understanding of what's really going on in the body. So just for a few minutes, you guys can unmute yourselves, right? Anybody have any questions on anything? Just blurt out there. Anybody? If I don't know the answer, I'll make it up.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, I have a
Bridget.
statement. The I get so that's the old wives' tale that you have to eat breakfast when you wake up in the morning because you've slept all night with no food. So now you need the
Energy.
energy to run your day.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand that. I hear that all the time. I see that all the time. It's utter and complete nonsense. The people that say that are incorrect. Now, I'm not saying they're stupid. They're just ignorant. Ignorant just means you don't know. They don't know. They're not understanding. There's nothing. They don't understand. There's nothing wrong with breakfast either. But the problem with eating breakfast, a full lunch, and a full dinner, that's probably too many calories during the day, and that's not enough oscillation or time between meals. Hey, if you want to eat a breakfast, that's fine. Hey, skip lunch and then just have dinner. That's more oscillation during the day. There's no meal more or less important than any other meal. To say that you need it, and that's how you get yourself going and how you get your energy, it's actually the opposite of that. Food does not give you energy. Food triggers the release of hormones that trigger sleep. If I eat breakfast, I feel like going back to bed and going to sleep. Eat a full meal, you'll feel like sleeping. That's what food does, but
Right.
it takes hours for it to be converted to glucose and be readily available for energy. But people, they have kids believing this, so kids don't do well on the test. They go, oh, I didn't have breakfast. That's why. It's not the breakfast. It's just kids, especially kids. They know how to eat, but adults train them in the opposite manner. A kid at any age, if they say they're not hungry, you should respect that. Do not try to force them to eat. I don't care if they're overweight or thin. That has more to do with heredity than anything else. I don't care if you spend the whole day in the kitchen making a nice meal. It's a Saturday. They've been out playing and they didn't eat breakfast, and you made a nice lunch, and they come in and they go, I'm not hungry. And so, how you didn't eat breakfast and you've been playing? What do you mean you're not hungry? They're not hungry. Remember, hunger is hormonal. Just let them not eat. Then they'll go, well, they want to eat at 3. I just tell them, well, you had your chance at noon, wait again at 6. Then if they wait, they may actually like what you made at 6 because their hunger is really high. The more hungry you are, the more you will enjoy food. In fact, eating every other day, I enjoy food much more than people that eat every day. I guarantee you. The more you have time between meals, the better food will taste. That's why they say don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry, because you'll go, oh, I like this, and this. Go when you're full. You won't buy as much. But yeah, that's a wives' tale. I hear it all the time. The media reports it. Parents talk about it, and it's all over the internet. And I read the nonsense, and they'll go, well, this is from a registered dietitian. I don't care if it's from God himself or herself. Not to be sexist. That's utter nonsense. It's ridiculous. But yeah, people believe it. And there's so many
Thank
wise
you.
folks out there. Anybody have one or two more questions, guys, and I'll give you the other code.
I
Somebody
do.
asked, somebody unmute and ask.
I
Sure, go ahead. Whoever it is, I can't see.
Okay, so mine's more of a bit of an exemplary question. I just want to have a bit of a comparison.
Uh-huh.
So, especially when we went to Valley in person, I would work in the mornings, and so I didn't eat breakfast so much as I satiated my appetite, and then I would eat like enchiladas for lunch, and then I would
Uh-huh.
come home and eat dinner.
Right.
And I've been thinking about that as we've been going over, as you've been saying the lectures, because once I stopped going out, I realized I only ate 2 meals a day, really.
Okay, that's actually good, better than 3.
And I'm just thinking about it. So I really like the distinction you were saying between appetite, hunger, and starvation. But would you say like maybe satiating your appetite during times of the day, but still only eating with like eating big portions?
Versus
You get what I'm
smaller
trying to
ones.
say?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. It's like 6 one, half a dozen the other. You can be healthy and eat a bunch of little meals a day if the portions are really small. But the one thing you'll be missing is the oscillation in the glucose level. That tends to keep your glucose level normal too much. You may not gain weight and things like that. But I've known many students that have gone from 3 meals a day to 2, and they said it was made a big difference. They could tell a difference there in the weight, and in the way they felt better, way they felt. And then I've known some that have gone from 3 to 1, and they said one guy said it just changed his life. He went to 1 meal a day. He said everything improved in his life. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat healthy. Fruits and vegetables and not too much fat and less meat tends to be healthier. We'll get more into that later. But it's a bigger meal. It's some people say, well, that's going to raise your glucose level more, but it's temporary. And in fact, it'll raise it more, but it'll go down quicker because your cells are hungry. And so the glucose will go in the cells quicker. And fat cells don't get anything because the regular cells actually need that. It makes a really big difference, but it's a lifestyle you have to get used to. If you get used to eating lunch every day at noon, and you got to do it because you're at work, and you get used to it, and it's like people would interpret it as punishment, like you're skipping a meal, you're punishing yourself, or you go to a party and there's no food, and that's the problem that's associated with food. The problem in our society is not lack of food. In fact, there's enough food in the world for everybody, but it's the distribution of food. Some countries have too much, other countries don't have enough. But if you the distribution was proper, there wouldn't be any such thing as starvation. Starvation is not, skipping eating for a day or two. Starvation is a different issue. Starvation has to do with, anorexia nervosa and things like that. In fact, one of the bonus quizzes at one of the last modules is the movie Alive. It's like a 20 or a 30-year-old movie. Watch that, and you get 10 extra bonus points. No questions, tests you have to answer. Just message me what you thought about it. It's a very inspirational movie. It's about forced starvation. They didn't voluntarily do it, but they had to do it. But that's sort of a different issue. I could point to study after study and give you all kinds of reasons as to why it's beneficial to eat this way. But it is, I'm going to end on this note, and then I'm going to give you the 3 codes. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last one. I can't remember, but it might be a little bit of a repeat. I've worked with cancer patients on nutrition at various times. One particular lady, she had a stage 3 breast cancer. So we researched around, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to repeat it. And so I thought, well, where's the best cancer treatment? I'm not a cancer doctor, but I know about nutrition, its effect on cancer, but treatments, you need to go to an oncologist. Beverly Hills Cancer Center. Well, that sounds good. Like that must be the best in the world. They were rated real high. So we went there, and she had the surgery. It was malignant, and I knew that the doctor would recommend chemotherapy and radiation, which, I thought, okay, well, this is exactly what they need to do. So she did that. She's completely cured now of the cancer, but one of the things the doctor did not address nor understand was nutrition, even though she's a great oncologist, great cancer doctor, knew very little about nutrition, because I was with the patient at the first visit with the doctor once the chemotherapy got started, and did a bunch of blood tests, and her blood test came back fairly normal, but chemotherapy can mess it up and certain things, and especially the vitamin D levels. And so she said, well, your vitamin D levels are low, so I'm writing you a prescription for vitamin D. Well, the prescription she wrote, because I looked at it, was vitamin D2. It's called ergocalciferol. Vitamin D3 is the kind you go into the store and buy. It'll say D3, or if it just says vitamin D, it's D3. There's 5 types. D2 is only half as effective as D3. Yet insurance charges $300, $400, $500 a bottle for D2. If you really understand what happens with vitamin D, which I don't think she did, was that D2 is converted in the liver into D3 at a 50% effective rate. In fact, when they do blood tests, they test for both of them, D2 and D3. It's a certain derivative of it. But anyway, I thought I got to go back and research this even more. And I was right, because all over the internet, it was called scam, D2 prescription, D2 prescription. She had hundreds of patients, maybe thousands on D2. Well, D2 is manufactured only in 5 places in the world, a couple of them in Japan. It's complicated how they make it, but D3 is much easier to make. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. Why would you write a prescription for D2 when you can buy D3 over the counter for like $8 a bottle, and D2 costs so much? Is there something going on with the money involved with insurance and the pharmacies and the people that manufacture this? Some doctors know this, some actually don't, because that's been the standard. I'm not saying that they do, but that's been the standard. Don't ever get caught up in the D2 scam. Research it yourself. It's not as effective as D3. Even though it's a prescription, it's not as effective. And so the next time we went in, I gently brought this up. I said, is it okay if she takes D3? And she actually looked at me and said, where do you teach at? I said, Valley Community College. She kind of rolled her eyes. I thought, okay, here we go. Community college. She thought, this guy doesn't know anything. And then she said, D3 is not prescription. D2 can only be attained by prescription. That's why I'm writing it. I said, yeah, but you don't need it. It's converted to D3 in the liver. And she actually got mad. She did her hands like this and said, okay, if you know more about this than I do, go ahead. I can't have a discussion with somebody like that doesn't want to listen to the facts. I don't care how many rewards, titles she has. That she's wrong on that. And I was right, because I double checked the research and it's all out there. Be real careful when people tell you you need to do this, or I'm an MD, your doctor says this, your doctor says that. Most doctors are good, but a lot of them are not, and they thrive on the ignorance of their patients in terms of what they do. And sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they just don't know. And that's what's really sad. Okay, guys, so the last 3 codes are 989. So everybody got that? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this meeting in a minute. Now I have to go and activate the test, because I don't think it's active until 8 o'clock. So you go in there, take it's called conference or Zoom test 2 or whatever it is. I can't remember, it's under modules. And enter those 3 codes, and then your points will come up instantly. A little bit of review. Once again, don't forget, second video quiz due tomorrow by midnight. Work your study guides. Remember, I have those Zoom 3 to 5 meetings where you can compare. You don't have to do them all. Say somebody does one, get with somebody. Say, how you do this one, I'll do that one. get with 6 people. Each of you can do one of the study guides, and you can all just share them with each other. That's why we have that. You can do that in chat also. I don't have a time set aside for chat. You can message other people in class saying, hey, have you worked this study guide? Can you share it with me? There's no problem with that, okay? So I'm going to end the meeting. Give me a couple of minutes to set the test up, and then I will see you in our next meeting, okay? So bye for now.